Welcome back. Today's story filled with drama and unexpected turns. Hit like, subscribe, and let's jump in.
It was a Friday afternoon, and I had just finished a week fixing some equipment at a waste plant in northern Texas. I was heading home on time when my wife, Olivia, gave me a call at 4:30, asking when I'd arrive. This was normal since I often got delayed or caught in traffic. The call dropped because of bad signal, so I redialed her work number using hands-free, only to find out she had already left for the day. At the same time, she tried calling me back. I picked up. "Daniel, are you all right?" This line is better. "I'm fine, I just left the site and will be home in about 4 hours. Need anything?" "No, just you." "Well, maybe grab some carrots and lettuce at the market. Dinner will be ready." I arrived nearly on the dot, walked in, and hung my jacket in the hall closet. Olivia called out from upstairs, and I called a hello back. Not to sound particular, but there were only a few wooden coat hangers in that closet, and I always used one for my coat. To my surprise, it was occupied by a pricey wool blazer. I tried it on, it fit, though a tad short on the sleeves. Inside the pockets were business cards, receipts, and things. Apparently, someone named Nathan Miller bought something from an Beacon pharmacy in the city at 5:10 that afternoon. I hung it back up and closed the door. Soon, I'd know what this was about. Olivia came downstairs barefoot, wearing just a simple dress, still slightly damp from a shower. We kissed. She didn't entwelve it erotically, just comfortable at home, as she rarely wore much if she wasn't expecting anyone or going out. But to me, she looked as lovely as ever. "Been home long?" "No, I beat you by 10 minutes. It's been a day. I planned to cook but didn't shop, so I ordered Italian. It'll be here in half an hour. Is that okay?" "Fine by me." I settled in. "Busy at the office today?" "Yeah, I stayed late working on new promotional ideas for this cookware line. They're really tacky, but they're cheap and flashy." I let the comment about her afternoon slide as we chatted until the food came. I paid the delivery boy, and we sat down to pizza, pasta, and salads. Over a sip of tea, I said, "You know, we may need to call the police. Seems like we were broken into. And I think I know who." She looked startled. "What are you talking about?" "Well, the intruder was sloppy. Left his coat in the closet, and his name's Carter. I doubt the police will have trouble tracking him down." "Oh, that coat. It belongs to Nathan Miller from work. I brought it home. I'll take it back tomorrow." I stayed quiet, hoping she'd fidget and explain. When she didn't, I asked, "Why'd you bring his coat here?" She sighed, irritated. "He left it in my office. I didn't want the cleaning staff to take it." "Why are you asking?" I shrugged. "Just sounds a bit strange. Why bring it home only to return it the next morning?" But she waved me off with a laugh about my conspiracy theories. We chatted a while longer and eventually turned in for the night. As she drifted to sleep, I lay thinking Olivia and I married for life, to share a future and grow old together. If she's ever unhappy, I'd rather she tell me outright than have an affair. I couldn't handle a betrayal like that. The next month, I was supervising 2 crews at a machinery plant in Greenville, Michigan. We were on a bonus schedule, so we worked 2 evening shifts straight. After cleanup, I left the site around 1 a.m., aiming to drive leisurely down through Ohio's scenic routes. I stopped at Clearwater Park, a historic stop dating back to the 1800s, and paid the $14 entrance fee. I pocketed the receipt and took a quick walk, admiring the quiet of the old farmland. Around 2 p.m., I got home, circled the block to find parking, and went inside, entwelving to nap before Olivia got home. But I woke up startled by a noise from the living room. I moved quietly and saw a man, Nathan Miller, having sex with my wife. I picked up an old oak stool and brought it down on his head. There was a horrible crunch, and he slumped forward, his head hitting Olivia's face. Blood poured from her nose as I stood there, horrified. Panic hit. I ran out, determined to pre-12 I'd never been there. I drove to a cafe in Oakfield, where a barista named Zoe served me a latte and a muffin. I made a point of chatting so she'd remember me, hoping that'd be a solid alibi. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Olivia told the nurse she'd been attacked by a stranger. Her family gathered, and I pre-12'd concern. I didn't hit Olivia in the face intentionally, my target had been Carter. But guilt gnawed at me nonetheless. We tried to work on our marriage. I cut back on work travel, and we did some counseling. I wanted to trust her again. But then, I discovered her car at a motel with Carter. I went home, packed, and handed her divorce papers when she arrived. I was done. 6 months later, I'd moved on. I'd lost years to guilt and betrayal but was finally feeling whole again. The morning after handing Olivia the divorce papers, I woke with a strange mix of relief and finality. I'd wasted months trying to salvage something that had died long before I confronted her about the affair. I'd felt guilty, ashamed, like I owed it to her to help her through her surgeries, my contribution to the mess she'd become. But now, I could finally let that weight go. I spent the next few weeks settling into my new place. It was quieter, smaller, but it felt like a sanctuary. I had my bed, my few pieces of furniture, and a kitchen that held only what I needed. I started working longer hours and picking up a few hobbies I'd neglected. By winter, I had nearly forgot how hollow and angry I had felt. Olivia, though, continued her own narrative. She'd kept in contact with a few mutual friends, and I heard through them that she was telling people how she was working on herself and learning to trust again. It irritated me, the way she played the victim in all this. Meanwhile, Carter was apparently still around, though the two were now just friends. Good for him. Months passed, and by summer, I was thriving. My business grew steadily, and I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in years. I even went out on a few dates. Nothing serious, just casual dinners, but it felt good to be reminded of life outside my marriage. I realized I hadn't just lost Olivia, I'd lost a part of myself, too. Then one day, while out on a hike in Greenwood Reserve, I ran into Olivia. She was with a friend, and we exchanged a brief, 12's hello. She looked different, maybe it was the surgeries, or maybe I'd just lost the familiar image I had of her. We made small talk, and she mentioned she was seeing someone new. I nodded, indifferent. After a few minutes, I excused myself and continued up the trail, leaving her behind. It struck me how free I felt. No anger, no guilt, just a simple awareness that I was moving on and she no longer held any power over me. A few weeks later, I signed the final paperwork for our divorce. It was a warm day in mid-April, and I celebrated by taking the day off and driving upstate to relax. This was the closure I had wanted all along. Now, every so often, I'll remember that old life, the betrayal, the guilt, the years I spent wondering if I'd ever be happy again. But it's just a memory, something distant. I'd built a new life for myself, one where I no longer needed anyone else's validation or approval. As I pulled into my driveway that night, I realized that I was, at last, truly home. The months following the divorce felt like a second chapter of my life. I started focusing more on the business, investing in new equipment, and taking on bigger clients. The work kept me busy, and it was good for the business, and for me. I even hired a few additional crew members, which allowed me to take on larger projects without having to travel so much. Being able to stick close to home was a newfound freedom. One evening in July, I was at a friend's barbecue when I met Laura. She was different from Olivia in every way, down to earth, funny, with this infectious laugh that immediately put everyone at ease. We hit it off, and by the end of the night, I had her number. We went out the following weekend, and it felt simple. No games, no underlying 12-shown. Just good conversation, a shared meal, and a sense of ease I hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next few months, Laura and I got to know each other better. We'd go on weekend hikes, visit local art fairs, or spend quiet evenings cooking dinner together. There was a warmth to our relationship that felt honest and genuine. I found myself looking forward to our time together, feeling at peace with how things had turned out. But occasionally, the past would creep up on me. A few friends who were still in touch with Olivia would bring up her name, mentioning updates I didn't really want to hear. They told me she had moved out of the area, that she was now working in Chicago and dating someone new. I'd just nod, offering polite disinterest, but inside, I was grateful that she had moved on in her own way, giving me the clean break I'd needed. One Friday evening, as Laura and I were winding down after dinner, she asked about my past relationships. I hesitated, not because I was hiding anything but because I wasn't sure how to explain what had happened with Olivia in a way that would make sense without diving into every painful detail. So, I told her the basics. My last relationship ended in betrayal. We tried to make it work, but it just didn't. I'm grateful for the lessons it taught me, though. It's made me appreciate honesty and trust so much more. She looked at me thoughtfully and nodded. I get it. We've all had experiences that shaped us, even if they were painful. We left it at that, moving on to lighter topics, but I could feel the difference in our relationship after that night. I'd opened up a piece of myself, and Laura respected it without prying. I knew I was in a place where I could finally allow myself to be vulnerable again. As fall came around, Laura and I grew closer, spending more time together and talking about our future. She'd started hinting that maybe we should move in together, and for the first time in years, the idea didn't terrify me. I wanted a future with someone who valued me, who respected me, and who I could trust entirely. One crisp November morning, we went for a hike through a local park, the trees ablaze in autumn colors. As we walked, I realized how far I'd come, from that turbulent period after the divorce, through rebuilding myself, to finding happiness in a way I hadn't expected. I reached for her hand, and she smiled up at me, a look of contentment in her eyes. In that moment, I knew I'd finally found what I'd been searching for: peace, trust, and a sense of genuine companionship. The painful memories of the past had faded, leaving room for something real and lasting. And as we walked down the path together, I felt more hopeful than I had in years. By winter, Laura and I had made the decision to move in together. We found a cozy apartment just outside the city with large windows that filled the space with light, a fireplace, and even a little balcony with room for plants and a small table. Moving in was a whirlwind of packing, sorting, and rearranging our lives to fit together under one roof. It felt like a fresh start, something I hadn't realized I needed so much until it happened. Living together was easy, surprisingly so. I loved the little routines we fell into, like making coffee together in the mornings, deciding who would cook dinner each night, and taking turns picking movies to watch on quiet evenings. Our lives started blending in a way that felt natural, as if this was how things were meant to be all along. One evening in February, after a long day, we sat by the fire, sharing a bottle of wine and reminiscing about childhood memories. Laura laughed as she told me about the time she got stuck in a tree as a kid, and her father had to climb up and rescue her. I told her about my early days working odd jobs to save up for my first car, a beat-up Honda I'd barely kept running. We laughed until our faces hurt, and it struck me just how much she felt like home. Over the next few months, life settled into a pleasant rhythm. I'd long since stopped hearing any updates about Olivia, which I was grateful for. It allowed me to fully embrace the life I was building with Laura without any reminders of the past. Spring brought new opportunities for the business. One of my biggest clients recommended me to a large contractor, and the job offer was enough to make a big difference. It was a project that would require a few more people, so I hired 2 additional crew members and invested in new tools. Laura was my biggest cheerleader, encouraging me every step of the way. Having her by my side made me realize how much I valued her support. Then one sunny Saturday, we went out to a local festival, enjoying the food, music, and crafts. We were strolling hand in hand when we passed by a small jewelry booth, and Laura stopped to admire a delicate silver ring with a tiny sapphire in the center. She picked it up, turning it over, and then put it back with a little smile. Later that week, I returned to the festival grounds and bought the ring. I didn't have a grand plan, but I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. The following weekend, we went to our favorite park for a picnic, and after we'd finished eating, I took her hand and told her how much she meant to me, how she'd made me believe in love and trust again. With that, I took out the little box and opened it. Her eyes widened, and before I could even finish asking, she said, "Yes." She wrapped her arms around me, and in that moment, everything felt right. We sat there, looking out over the water, both of us knowing that we were stepping into something beautiful together. In the weeks that followed, we started planning a small wedding with close friends and family. Life felt vibrant and full of promise. The painful memories I'd carried for so long were finally just that, memories. I had moved on, not just to a new chapter, but to a whole new book, one where I was genuinely happy. Our wedding day was simple and intimate, held in a little garden surrounded by friends and family. As Laura and I exchanged vows, I felt a wave of gratitude for all the moments, good and bad, that had brought me to this point. And as we stood together, ready to face whatever came our way, I knew that I had finally found my true home. With Laura, I had found not just love but a deep, abiding partnership. Together, we were ready to create a life built on trust, laughter, and a shared commitment to one another. In that moment, I understood everything that had come before had led me here, and here was exactly where I was meant to be. After the wedding, Laura and I took a short honeymoon along the Florida shoreline, driving up Route 77 with the windows down, the ocean breeze filling the car as we made our way from one charming town to the next. We stayed in small bed-and breakfasts, savoring each stop without a set itinerary. It was freeing, living in the moment with no need to look back or ahead. During one of those quiet evenings, while watching the sunset from a little cliffside inn, Laura leaned her head on my shoulder and said, "This feels like the start of something beautiful, doesn't it?" I nodded, pulling her close. It's the best beginning I could ask for. When we returned home, life fell into a peaceful, familiar rhythm. We started talking about long-term plans, things like buying a house, maybe starting a family. But there was no rush. For the first time, I felt grounded and patient, knowing we had time to grow and build things together. Work was busier than ever, and the business was thriving. Laura had taken a new position in a community health clinic nearby, which she loved. Her stories about the patients she helped and the challenges she faced every day reminded me of her compassion and strength, and I admired her all the more for it. One weekend, we decided to explore a neighborhood just outside the city. It was an area with tree-lined streets and older homes with big porches and gardens out front. As we walked past one house with a "for sale" sign out front, Laura squeezed my hand and said, "Imagine us here. A little garden, maybe a dog, and a couple of kids running around." I could picture it vividly. The idea of creating a space with Laura, somewhere that was entirely ours, felt like a natural next step. The more we talked about it, the more real it became, and within a few months, we had saved up enough to make an offer on a small craftsman house with a little yard, exactly as we'd imagined. Moving in was exhilarating and a bit chaotic, with boxes piled high and furniture to arrange. But it was our space, a place we could shape together. Laura started working on the garden almost immediately, planting herbs, flowers, and even a few vegetables. I took on the small repairs and projects that came with an older home, discovering a new kind of satisfaction in the work. One evening, while painting the nursery, though we weren't quite there yet, I looked over at Laura, who was smudged with paint and laughing at something silly I'd said. I felt a wave of gratitude and contentment wash over me. All those years of heartache, the struggles, the rebuilding of trust, they all made sense now, like puzzle pieces fitting together. I understood that every moment had led me to her, to this life we were creating. As the years went by, our life continued to blossom. We did eventually adopt a dog, a scruffy mutt named Max, who became a beloved part of the family. And before long, the nursery we'd painted together was filled with the sound of tiny feet and joyful laughter as we welcomed our first child, a little girl we named Sophia. Watching Laura with Sophia brought a new depth to my love for her. She was a natural mother, patient, kind, and endlessly devoted. As Sophia grew, Laura and I learned to navigate the highs and lows of parenthood together, relying on each other's strengths and understanding. In those quiet moments, after Sophia was tucked in for the night, Laura and I would sit on the back porch, reminiscing about where we'd started and marveling at how far we'd come. Life wasn't perfect, there were challenges, of course, but we faced them together, with an unwavering commitment to one another and to the family we'd built. Over time, as our family grew and new memories were made, the past faded even further, becoming a distant chapter one no longer needed to revisit. My life with Laura was my focus, a life full of love, laughter, and joy. And as I looked at everything we'd created together, I knew I had found my true happiness. Years later, sitting in our backyard with Laura by my side, watching Sophia chase Max around the yard, I felt a peace I'd never thought possible. I no longer needed to take the long way home, I was already there. As the years continued, the life Laura and I built together grew richer. Our home became the gathering place for family and friends, a lively hub where memories were made and cherished. Every holiday, we'd have a house full of laughter, food, and warmth. Sophia grew up surrounded by love, learning the values of kindness, resilience, and trust that Laura and I had worked hard to instill in her. One crisp autumn day, as Sophia was helping Laura pick apples from the tree we had planted together, I stood back and watched, feeling the enormity of how much had changed in my life since those dark times. I thought about how grateful I was for Laura's unwavering support and the deep bond we'd formed over the years. We were more than partners, we were each other's rock, best friend, and confidant. Sophia was 12 when she came home one day and, with a serious look on her face, asked if we could get a little brother or sister for her. Laura and I laughed, but her request sparked a conversation we'd never fully entertained. After talking it over, we decided that we'd try to grow our family again, and a year later, we welcomed a baby boy, Benjamin. Benjamin's arrival brought a renewed sense of joy to our home, and Sophia adored her little brother, helping with diaper changes, singing lullabies, and teaching him all the things she knew. Watching Laura with Benjamin reminded me of those early days with Sophia, and I felt overwhelmed by the sense of complete wellness our family now had. As Sophia grew into her teen years, she became curious about our lives before we met. I shared the parts of my past that I thought would be meaningful for her to understand, the times of struggle, resilience, and the importance of self-respect and boundaries. I wanted her to understand that life's most difficult moments could lead to the most beautiful outcomes if approached with openness and a willingness to grow. One evening, Sophia asked me, "Dad, do you ever regret the things that happened before you met Mom?" It was a question I'd never really asked myself, but after a moment's thought, I answered her honestly. "No, sweetheart. Every experience, even the hard ones, shaped who I am and led me to your mom and, eventually, to you and Benjamin. Sometimes, life takes us through difficult places to show us what really matters." She nodded, thoughtful. I could see her processing it, and I knew she'd carry that wisdom forward, applying it to her own life as she grew. As the years rolled on, our life continued to evolve in beautiful, unexpected ways. Laura and I watched as Sophia graduated high school, then college, and set off to explore the world. Benjamin, with his boundless curiosity, quickly grew into a young man with a passion for mechanics and a knack for fixing things, much like I had when I was younger. One summer evening, while Laura and I were watching the sunset from the porch, she took my hand and said, "We've had a good life, haven't we?" I smiled, thinking of all we'd shared and overcome together. "The best," I replied, pulling her close. We sat in comfortable silence, the years passing through my mind like a beautiful reel of memories. Every up and down, every hard-won lesson, every moment of laughter and love, they all blended into the rich tapestry that was our life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew I wouldn't change a single thing. I'd found not only happiness but a deep and lasting contentment. With Laura by my side, surrounded by the family we'd created, I'd finally learned that home wasn't just a place. It was a feeling, a sense of peace, of love, and of belonging. And I was exactly where I was meant to be. As Laura and I entered our later years, life's pace began to slow down. We found joy in the simplicity of our days, quiet mornings with coffee, walks around the neighborhood, and evenings spent reminiscing over the photos and memories we'd collected. Sophia would visit off 12, bringing stories of her travels and the people she'd met, while Benjamin, who had settled nearby, would drop by regularly to help around the house or just to spend time with us. One evening, as Laura and I sat on the porch watching the fireflies dance across the yard, she reached for my hand and said, "You know, I feel like we've lived a dozen lifetimes together. And every one of them has been worth it." Her words lingered in the air, and I felt a deep sense of gratitude. We'd faced our share of hardships, but through it all, we had built a life together that was true and fulfilling. There was no need for grand gestures or dramatic moments, it was the quiet consistency of our love that had carried us through. Our family continued to grow, with Sophia eventually settling down and bringing 2 grandkids into our lives, a spirited boy named Lucas and a thoughtful girl named Isabella. They brought new energy to our home, filling it with laughter and chaos in the best way. Benjamin, too, had started his own family, and every holiday, our home would fill with the sounds of running feet, shared meals, and stories passed down from one generation to the next. With each passing year, the stories Laura and I shared with them became treasured pieces of family lore. The grandkids would beg us to tell the tales of their mom and uncle when they were young, and sometimes, with a mischievous twinkle in her eye, Laura would tell them how their grandpa once took a very long way home to find his way to her. It was during one of these gatherings that Lucas, now 12, looked up at me and asked, "Grandpa, what's your favorite thing in the whole world?" The answer came effortlessly. "Right here, kiddo. Everything I love most is right here." Our family grew even closer, and the years passed gently, each one adding layers of love and memories. I'd look around at our family gathered for dinners, the house filled with joy and warmth, and marvel at the life we'd built. Laura and I of 12 exchanged quiet smiles, understanding without words that this, our family, our home, was the legacy we'd created together. Then one warm summer evening, while sitting together on the porch, Laura took my hand and leaned her head on my shoulder, just as she had so many times before. We sat in silence, the sun setting, casting a warm golden light across the yard. She gave my hand a squeeze and whispered, "Thank you for everything." I kissed her forehead and replied, "No, thank you for choosing to share this life with me." As the years continued, we found ourselves reflecting more of 12, not with sadness but with a sense of fulfillment. We had loved, grown, and shared our lives in ways we never could have anticipated. We knew our time together would someday come to a close, as all lives must, but there was a peace in knowing we had truly lived, loved, and left a legacy that would carry on. In the end, when that day finally came and I found myself standing in our home, now quiet, I felt more gratitude than sorrow. Our lives had been a gift, a beautiful journey I wouldn't have traded for anything. And so, each evening, as I sit on the porch watching the fireflies light up the yard, I feel her presence beside me, a warmth that never fades. Our love, our life, it lives on in the laughter of our children, the stories of our grandchildren, and in every cherished memory we created together. I know that, even now, I am home. In the months that followed, the house was quieter than it had ever been. The absence of Laura was a void I carried with me, but it wasn't empty, it was filled with the memories of our shared life. I kept our routines, spending time in the garden she had 12'd so lovingly, walking through the rooms that still felt infused with her laughter, her kindness, and her gentle spirit. Friends and family checked in of 12, especially Sophia and Benjamin, who had a knack for knowing just when I needed company. One evening, Sophia brought over a photo album she'd put together. As we flipped through it, each picture captured moments I hadn't thought about in years, birthdays, vacations, those everyday scenes that, at the time, seemed ordinary but were now treasures. There was a picture of Laura and me in our early days, standing side by side in the garden, both of us laughing at something one of the kids had said. Sophia pointed to it and said, "I remember that day. You two were so happy. I hope I find what you both had." I looked at her, feeling a mix of pride and gratitude. "You will, sweetheart. Just remember, it's the little things that make a life together. The laughter, the support, and, most of all, trust. Your mom taught me that." As time passed, I settled into a gentle rhythm of life. I'd of 12 find myself sitting in Laura's garden, watching the plants grow, carrying on her tradition of 12ing to each flower with care. It became my place of solace, a space where I felt connected to her, even in her absence. The seasons continued their cycle, and the house remained a gathering place for our family. Every holiday, the kids and grandkids would arrive, filling the rooms with laughter and energy. It felt as if Laura was still with us, her presence woven into the walls, the furniture, and the stories we'd built here. One crisp autumn day, I decided to go through some of Laura's belongings. Among her things, I found a small, well-worn journal I hadn't seen before. Inside were entries spanning our life together, her thoughts on our early years, her reflections on motherhood, and, to my surprise, even musings on our life in those final years. She wrote about the gratitude she felt for our family, her pride in our children, and how deeply she'd loved me. One of her final entries read, "No matter what happens, I feel fulfilled. I know Daniel will carry on, surrounded by the family we created. I trust he'll find comfort in knowing he was everything to me, my best friend, my partner, my love." Her words brought both tears and peace. I realized that she had left me this gift, a reminder of the love and life we had shared. I tucked the journal away, knowing I'd return to it of 12, a bridge to her presence whenever I needed it. In the years that followed, I took comfort in my family, my community, and the simple beauty of everyday life. I volunteered at a local garden center, sharing tips with younger gardeners and passing on Laura's love for plants and flowers. I even started teaching my grandkids about gardening, showing them how to plant seeds and care for them. Watching them grow as I 12 to the plants was a joy I hadn't anticipated. One summer, on the anniversary of our wedding, Sophia and Benjamin surprised me with a special gathering. They'd brought together family and close friends, a celebration of the life Laura and I had built. They shared stories and laughs, and as the evening sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a peace I hadn't felt in years. We gathered around a small patch of garden we dedicated to Laura's memory, a place filled with her favorite flowers, roses, lavender, and sunflowers. It was a fitting tribute to the woman who had brought so much beauty and warmth into our lives. That night, as I sat on the porch, watching the stars, I felt her presence more than ever. I knew that Laura was with me, in the laughter of our children, the love of our family, and the legacy we had created together. In time, I learned that life goes on, not in forgetting, but in honoring. Laura's love continued to guide me, like a quiet, steady flame lighting my path. And as I grew older, I found myself embracing each day with a sense of peace, grateful for the beautiful life we'd shared and the family that carried her memory forward. In the end, I realized, love doesn't fade, it transforms. And though our journey together had ended, it had left me with a heart full of love, memories, and a life well lived. And so, each evening, as I sat on the porch, the fireflies glowing in the yard, I knew Laura was still with me, always and forever, my true home. As the years drifted on, I found more ways to honor Laura's memory, building little rituals into my days that reminded me of her. Every morning, I'd sit by the kitchen window with my coffee, gazing out at the garden we'd 12 together. There was a sense of calm that washed over me in those quiet moments, as if she were sitting beside me, sharing the view. The garden became a sacred space, not just for me but for everyone in our family. Sophia and Benjamin would bring their kids over on weekends, and we'd work together to plant new flowers and vegetables, laughing as we passed down the traditions Laura had started. The grandkids took to it with enthusiasm, especially Lucas, who had developed a green thumb. He'd ask endless questions about the plants, and every time he learned something new, his face would light up. It was as if a piece of Laura lived on in him, in his curiosity and love for life. One summer, the family surprised me by organizing a community garden day in Laura's memory. Friends, neighbors, and even people from Laura's old workplace came together to plant flowers and vegetables around the neighborhood. It was a beautiful tribute to her, seeing everyone working together to create something that would flourish and grow, just as she had in our lives. By the end of the day, the streets were lined with blooms of all colors, a living testament to her kindness and her dedication to bringing beauty into the world. Over time, I came to realize that love had a way of showing itself in unexpected places. On the nights when I'd sit out on the porch, I'd oft hear the distant laughter of children playing, the rustling of leaves, the gentle hum of life continuing around me. In those quiet moments, I felt her presence as surely as if she were still beside me. One evening, as I was closing up the house, I came across a letter in Laura's handwriting tucked between the pages of one of her old gardening books. It was addressed to me. My hands trembled as I opened it, and I took a deep breath as I began to read. "Dear Daniel," it began. "If you're reading this, it means I'm not there to say these words to you in person. I want you to know that every day of our life together was a gift. I never took it for granted, not for a single moment. You were my best friend, my love, my partner in everything. I hope that, as you read this, you know how grateful I am for the life we shared." I felt a lump in my throat as I continued reading. "I don't want you to be sad, Daniel. I want you to live fully, to carry on with a heart open to love, laughter, and new experiences. Life has a way of surprising us, and I know you have so much more to give, to learn, to feel. Remember, I am always with you, in the garden, in the laughter of our children and grandchildren, and in every sunrise and sunset. You gave me a life I couldn't have dreamed of, and I know you'll carry on, because that's who you are. And I'll be there, in every memory, every joy you find." The letter ended with her familiar signature, "All my love, forever, Laura." I sat there for a long time, the letter in my hand, feeling both the depth of my loss and the enduring warmth of her love. It was as though Laura had reached through time to remind me to keep going, to embrace life as she had taught me to. In the days that followed, I made a conscious effort to live by her words. I spent more time with Sophia and Benjamin, helping them with projects, attending every school event for the grandkids, and sharing with them the wisdom Laura and I had gathered over our years together. I joined community events, reconnected with old friends, and even picked up a few new hobbies. And each time I found joy in these simple pleasures, I felt Laura's spirit beside me, encouraging me to embrace this new chapter with the same love and openness we had shared. The years were kind. I grew older, watching my children and grandchildren grow and thrive, passing on the values Laura and I had instilled in them. And as I looked back over my life, I realized that every moment, every joy, every sorrow, every quiet evening on the porch, had brought me closer to understanding the true meaning of love. On my last evening, I sat out on the porch as the sun set, filling the sky with colors that seemed almost too beautiful to be real. I could feel a deep sense of peace settling over me, a gentle warmth that felt like a familiar embrace. I closed my eyes, letting that warmth wash over me, and in that quiet, timeless moment, I felt Laura's presence more vividly than ever. With a smile, I whispered, "Thank you for everything, my love," and let myself drift into the peace I'd found, knowing that I was, at last, truly home. Thank you for watching this journey through resilience, heartbreak, and new beginnings. Life often leads us through unexpected paths, and sometimes, those paths are where we find our greatest strength. What part of this story resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more incredible stories like this one.